Hello, welcome to another video by Moxon Marine. In this video I'm assembling a 4.3 liter V6 and I've got half the pistons in. I've put all the odd ones in, 1, 3, and 5 in first, and I'm about to do the even ones in just a second. But before I go ahead and finish that, I want to do a quick video on, and give some tips that I don't know if I've covered before or not. This is going to be a quick video, just some tips that I do, or things that I do that help me to speed up the process. So as I've stated before, the first thing you want to do after you get your crankshaft in is put the camshaft in. Get your camshaft in, or actually you can put the camshaft in first if you want to. And the reason is there's cam bearings in there. There's 4 cam bearings in there, and I just so happened to have a bad cam bearing. The cam bearing in the number 2 spot was either manufactured wrong or it had a defect. It was too thick, and I could not get the cam to spin. Matter of fact, it got stuck in there. It got stuck, and I had to, believe it or not, it got stuck so tight I had to use a slide hammer, 5-pound slide hammer, to pull it back out. That's how stuck it got. So I happen to have a cam bearing installation tool, so I knocked this cam bearing out, and also just happen to have another customer's 4.3 liter V6 there, and I used the cam bearing, knocked the number 2 cam bearing out of that block and put it here to solve the problem, and I'll replace the other customer's bearing later. But anyway, the bottom line is you want to make sure you get your cam in first, because if you have to knock the cam bearings out, you need access down through here, and you have some access with the crankshaft in. In this particular engine, I had already put the crankshaft in, and then I put the camshaft in. In hindsight, I wish I'd done the camshaft first, even though I had, without the connecting rods in, you can have access to your hand to get down in there and get the bearing out and so forth. Once you get the connecting rod, if you put the pistons in, the connecting rods, you forget it. You're not getting the cam bearings back out. They're in there for good. So that's one tip I want to give you on doing the 4.3 liter V6, or actually any small buck engine for that matter, or probably any engine that has a cam inside the block. Another tip that I wanted to give you is I don't put the front cover on yet, so I'm still putting pistons in. I don't put the front cover on until all my drivetrain is done. The pistons are in, cam's in, timing chain's in, obviously. And the reason is I have access to this crank snout right here, and there's a special tool you can put on here to help turn it, but you don't have to have the special tool. You can take a crescent wrench and set the crescent wrench so it is just the size of the snout. And as you rotate it around, it'll hit that key. There's a key right down there. As you rotate this around, it'll hit the key, and you can use a crescent wrench to turn the motor. It's a little tight since I got 3 in there. I got 3 pistons in so far. But you can see I'm using this crescent wrench to turn this motor around and position it for the next cylinder. So that's one tip that a local machine shop gave me to speed up things. Like I say, if you put your cover on, you won't have the snout want to be sticking out about maybe 1/4 of an inch. You can't grab a hold to it. So don't put your cover on until, you don't have to put the cover on, there's no need to, so wait until you get all the drivetrain or the rotating assembly in before you put your front cover on. The other tip I want to give you is when I put in pistons, what I do is I'll take my piston, I've got my pistons up here hanging on a nail. That's 2, 4, and 6. So when I put my pistons in, I don't have the rings on here yet, but I like to do them in groups of 3 just to break up the monotony. So I've got to put check my ring gaps and then put them on the pistons and install these pistons. But I put once the rings are on here, I turn the gaps up so they're all facing straight up. Well, this one doesn't have a gap, but there's a gap right there and a gap right there. And I take a syringe of oil. I got a syringe here full of oil, and I put quite a bit. I just fill up the gap, whatever the gap is there, fill up that gap with oil on both rings, and then I put probably the same amount of oil on the bottom oil control ring. And then I grab it with my fingers and I rotate it. I turn it horizontal and I rotate it, and that lubricates the ring grooves. It gets the oil up in these grooves, because I think my opinion is once you put the piston in, the rings really can't get any oil because it's coming up from the bottom, and this ring, the oil control ring, limits the amount of oil that gets up here, these top 2 rings. So I go ahead and lubricate the rings fairly well, but it's not slobbered on, it's not dripping everywhere. It's just lightly coated once I rotate it around. Then I stagger my rings. I put 1 gap here and 1 on 180 degrees over there. The oil control ring doesn't really matter. and then I install my piston. And that's all the oil I use. I don't oil the cylinder, I don't oil anything else. And then once I get this rod bearing, the rod down there to the crankshaft, then I put some oil on the, after I plastic gauge check my clearance with plastic gauge, then I'll push the piston back down a little bit, move it over, put some drops of oil on the crankshaft journal, and then pull the piston rod back up. And then apply oil to the rod cap. But that's all the oil I put in the engine. Some people take the whole piston and dip it in a tub, dip it in like a pot of oil, and you'll have oil just pouring everywhere, and it just makes a big mess. And I don't see the need to do that. And then right before, once I get all the pistons in, when I flip it over and put the cylinder head on, right before I put the cylinder head on, I take some more oil and I put on my finger and I smear a film around the cylinder walls all the way down to the piston on all 6 cylinders, and that's how I oil the cylinders right before I put the cylinder head on. And that's the only oil I put in the engine. You want it to wear in anyway. You want it to break in. The bottom side of the piston, we get oil from this splash lubrication. The oil that's pumped to these journals will sling off these rods as it's spinning around, and it slings up into the cylinder and it slings up on your camshaft. That's how your camshaft and your cylinders get oil when the engine's running. So that's all the oil I use. I don't like to use a lot of oil because I don't want to make a mess. So that's it. That's a quick video on a few tips that I do to make my engines go smooth. You can see there's not a whole lot of oil down in there. Not much at all. Not much at all. I'm going to take a few drops, drop a few drops right there on the wrist pin there, and the wrist pin there, and the wrist. When I rotate out of the way, then I get to the wrist pin. So I'll put some oil there. That's it. Let me add one additional tip that I forgot to mention. So you see how that journal is all the way at the bottom? I'm about to do, this is cylinder number 2, and I'm about to put the piston in. So before I put the piston in, I turn the crankshaft journal all the way to the bottom dead center. That way it gets it out of the way while I'm knocking this piston in. It won't risk hitting that journal. And then once I get the piston in, I make sure that the engine's turned straight up vertically so that gravity helps keep the rod straight down, and then I just push it down over that journal. And you have to be careful. Sometimes the rod is turned or twisted, and it'll jam on that journal. So if you're not sure, you can use the front mark on the piston to kind of see if it's perpendicular to the parallel to the crankshaft. But a lot of times I'll push it down to where, and I don't push it all the way into the journal. I'll flip it over and pull it up on the journal and guide it. Make sure it gets on there and not crooked. So I'll do cylinder number 2. Then when I do, you see how the journal is not at the bottom. Before I do cylinder number 4, I have to rotate the crankshaft to move that journal right there down here at the bottom. And then here's number 6. You see the journal's almost at the top. So I have to do the same. I rotate that journal all the way to the bottom before I put number 6 in. So I assumed everybody kind of knew that, and I didn't mention it when I was talking about putting the rubbers. I don't know if I mentioned it before, but I put rubber caps on the rod bolts to keep it from hitting the crankshaft. But I didn't mention that tip before, but yeah, you have to assume everybody knew that, but you have to rotate the engine so that the journal's all the way at the bottom before you put the piston in that cylinder. All right, so I'm going to continue to put this together, and if you enjoy my videos and find them useful, please subscribe, and thanks for watching.